See, I was always a curious child. From the time my mother can remember, she said she would always find me taking things apart and putting them back together again. My fascination was with how things worked and how I could reassemble them. Some would say that would be the makings of a scientist or an engineer. To some extent, I would agree. Yet I was no more interested in finding out how it works than the questions of why it worked, or why it was created in the first place. Had I known my curiosity would lead me to questioning why I was created and actually finding out the answer, naturally I would have attempted to do things differently. See, before my grandmother's dream, I grew up in a working middle class suburb, which was small on the map. The part of town I lived in wasn't that far from the border of a small city, which at that time was not popular enough for recognition anywhere else in the United States. Yet, it has grown and it's widely known today. Due to the area's diverse socio-economic climate, I learned more about people at an early age by venturing in the areas around me than most people may have learned in high school, college, or possibly a lifetime. You see, my influences teeter-tottered back and forth from my middle school years, from those who lived in the suburbs to those who lived in the quote-unquote city, or lived the city life. As most of you already know, towards the end of my early childhood, I was shocked into a reality that was foreign to my somewhat sheltered suburban naive comprehension. Yet it was somehow written in my experience like the letter. After graduating from my early 5th to 6th grades of naivety to a better understanding of the other side of life, my 7th and 8th grade years provided an avenue that led to not only an older audience and a different school address, but it also led me to new sets of friends and circumstances. As my popularity grew with those around me, I experienced a different friendship that, while I didn't know at the time, brought me to another level of popularity I had no idea would emerge. See, my friend James was a poet. While slam poetry and spoken word didn't seem that popular in those times, he still wound up making a name for himself around town. Even though our town, like stated before, was sort of a small town, word traveled fast, not only around where we lived, but also in the surrounding areas. And for a young writer such as himself, his penmanship and showmanship became legendary. So, naturally, my reputation for being part of his social circle escalated. Besides his literary works, he just seemed like an all-around good guy. The jokester in him was also an attention getter. No matter where he and I and the rest of the group went, he always seemed to attract more people. I, on the other hand, was the balance. While I was not what most people today would call antisocial, I was more of an introvert whose aura was not always approachable. I was sort of the kind of guy where at first glance you either thought I was mute because my non-talkative get out my face, do I know you body language, or he's cool-headed, never flinches, nothing bothers him appearance, or he's just shy. Wait, he smiled. Whew. I thought it was my breath type exterior. You see, my experience with people was either hit or miss. I learned at an early age that the best relationships, or the longer lasting relationships, I should say, just happened. Usually when you begin to act more rather than to be yourself, the real you will then emerge as you become more comfortable with those persons you've established a relationship with. And most times they will not accept the real you because you didn't quite reveal you in the beginning. Understand? Either way, I learned that just being genuine worked better for me. When my friend James and I first hung out, there were many philosophical talks. I don't quite know how they started, but they usually were deep thoughts most people would think young men our age wouldn't engage in. In order to give you a proper perspective with analyzing the lives of both James and I would have to understand that James came from what one would call the average American middle class working household. You see, he grew up with both father and mother along with his siblings. I, on the other hand, grew up with my mother and sibling. And just off the bat, our experience, like most people, would differ greatly. See, I remember James and I sitting outside for lunch during school. While James had a knack for blending in with the average guy, he still had a way with convincing others to follow and respect his way of thinking. James began the conversation with subtly pointing out another high school student and explaining to me the difference between a leader and a follower. Lance, you see the guy over there sitting there by himself with his head down? You mean Cole? Right, that dude. I will make an observational prediction. About what? About his life. About his life? You think you can predict his life by observing him eating lunch? No, not him eating lunch. I'm looking at his posture. Look at the way he looks down, almost trying not to make contact with anyone around him. Right? Do you notice anything? He needs a haircut? No, idiot. There's no one checking for him. Everyone that has passed by him so far has said hi to everyone except him. Right. No one even acknowledges his presence. It's almost like he doesn't exist. I bet you his success in life will be little to none. Wait. So are you saying that because no one acknowledges him during lunch period, his life is doomed? How would you know that? No, but his appearance doesn't command for respect at all. No one checks for anyone whose head is always down, with no communication skills, or who doesn't even know their purpose in life. We're in high school, my man. I highly doubt many of us actually know what we're going to do after high school, college, or anywhere else for that matter. The college recruit that came and spoke to my class 2 weeks ago not only spoke about different majors they had available for students, but also the possibility that any one of us could switch majors at any time. And your point? And there's always a possibility that anyone could have a change of perspective that is different from the one they had originally. Therefore, you will make different choices due to it. Right, but how often does that happen? Statistically, children who grow up in a single parent home are the least likely to succeed. Yeah, I've heard that, but what does that have to do with Cole? Everything. Everything that happens to a person or whatever a person produces in his or her beginning of their life affects the overall outcome of their success in life. Nah, I disagree. There are those whose circumstances have adversely affected the way in which their lives are led, but then there are also the exceptions. Right. There are the exceptions, but not all. And I doubt Cole will be one of them. We will see. So, Miss Cleo, tell me about my future. You have a bright future, especially if you continue to hang out with successful types like myself, of course. Whatever, loser. See, there were many conversations James and I had that not only challenged each other's thinking, but also challenged our beliefs. And during the majority of high school, college, and afterwards, James and our crew popped wine bottles in celebration of our wins in life, as well as traded words of wisdom when going through hard times. My contemplation of my belief system was ongoing even after our eventual parting of ways. Oh yeah, like most close friends, life began to take ups and down paths that we probably never knew we would go through. Well, at least I didn't realize our friendship would meet that fork in the road. But still, in hindsight, if I am honest with myself, I knew that there were moments that our perception and upbringing brought about stark differences that eventually would at some point bring about a friction that no longer could be ignored.